welcome along. My name is Jess Iszatt. This is Shorts on Tap, and tonight we have our 6th chapter of our series, Reality Checks, a journey into documentary making. We're going to be featuring the best works from the contemporary UK and international independent short documentary scene, followed by a live Q&A with myself and the filmmakers. I hope you enjoy. Georgie, welcome along. Thank you so much for joining us here on Shorts on Tap. We've just watched your documentary, Amma, and I have to say, we're not allowed to have favourites, so I'm going to say it was one of my favourites. Just such a beautiful documentary.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it was really great for you guys to screen it, even though things are really weird right now. I still appreciate it so much.
It is a bit weird, isn't it? It's kind of like we're escaping through our screens. And I guess you've helped us do that in probably one of the most amazing locations ever. Talk to me a little bit about, I believe it's your background that kind of brought you to then go to Japan and find Amma. Talk to us about the start and how you kind of had those connections.
Yeah, so I'm half Japanese. My mother's Japanese, so I've spent most of my life going back and forth between Japan and the UK. And especially now as a director, I do a lot of work or films to do with Japan. And actually, the first time I met them was I was out shooting another documentary for another project, and we met them as part of that. But they were ultimately dropped from the final film, which I personally disagreed with quite strongly. But they really just stuck in my mind. So I kept in touch and I always wanted to go back and make a film about them. And then I was lucky enough that a funding opportunity came up called Female Film Force. And they liked the idea. So I was able to go back and kind of do the film that I wanted to do and sort of do them justice. It was sort of a frustrating start, but it all worked out for the best in the end, I think.
A blessing in disguise, because honestly, One of my top things was, how did you find this group of people that are just so like in their own world? And not only that, I think at the moment there is this whole female empowerment. I really feel it in all worlds, music and just like everything on screen, visibility wise, women just being iconic. But this dates back. These are all a bunch of women who've been doing this for decades.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, the sort of Amma tradition has existed for thousands of years in Japan. And I found them, I mean, I think what struck me most of all is, in many ways, Japan is still quite a heavily patriarchal country. And yet to have these women who are so strong and so unapologetically who they are and who are still keeping this amazing tradition alive. And I think, not only are they women, it's also the kind of age demographic you're talking about, right? How often do you hear stories about women, majority of the Amma who are in their sort of 60s, 70s, 80s now. I mean, that's partly what makes them so amazing, because they're so incredible still at that age. But I also think, there's a lot to say in, I think, storytelling in general, not just film, that we don't tend to hear kind of especially older women's stories.
Was it as old as 80s or into their 80s, and they quite literally have to be stopped by their family to
they get their buckets
back in the water
and their flippers hidden from them because they keep sneaking out to go and dive. I mean, some of them I think are in their 86, I think was maybe one of the oldest we met. And it is nuts. Like, you'll see them, I think you see it in the film, like some of them are really like sort of hunched over now and they're like hobbling along. And I remember watching them sort of climbing over the rocks, like, oh my God, if she slips over, she's going to break her hip. Exactly. And then boom, as soon as she was in the water, I mean, I couldn't keep up at all. It was so actually embarrassing, where I was like, I'm fine. I'm in my 20s back then. I was like, I can do this. And then within 10 minutes, I was like, oh,
Shall I tell you what? It just seems so free, all of it. As in, obviously, that's their way of life, but you managed to come along and just talk to them just like normal people, even though they're iconic. And then also just jumping in the water with them. Did you have any sort of training or anything with them before?
No, I mean, I have my PADI, like my very beginner's level PADI license for diving. But to be honest, I've only ever really only used that once since I got licensed. I've never filmed anything underwater either. I mean, actually, the plan was that we were going to go out there for about a week, 10 days, and we would dive every single day with them so that I'd have a chance to get used to it. I could shoot some stuff, come back and look at it and figure out like how I could improve or anything I need to fix. But then obviously, Mother Nature had other ideas. Yeah. So it ended up being what was supposed to be a 7-day dive was sandwiched down into 2 1-hour dives on the same day. And it was kind of a, well, make or break. You either get it now or you don't get it at all. So I think that kind of forced me to just be like, don't even think about it, just do it. And, you know, it'll work out.
I feel like you did in that sense really capture the reality of it, and also being able to go to the temples as well. I feel like this could be like a feature length documentary, couldn't it? I wanted to know more about Aiko and I guess her full family life and things. Do you think you'll go back? Do you think it's a possibility?
I would love to. And actually, we shot so much more than what you see in there. We probably have enough for at least 40-minute cut. There's actually, I think, 2 or 3 other people we met that aren't even in the short film. So, I mean, yeah, I would always, if the opportunity presented itself and the funding was available, we'd love to go back and, you know, expand it into a feature.
Hopefully someone watching has the powers that be, because you've got a viewer here, we've got the filmmaker here. That would be amazing. I'm honestly fascinated by them. And I guess one of the questions that you asked in it as well is, will this tradition last, or will it continue? Because obviously it is kind of like quite a dated practice almost. Did you find a conclusion for yourself, or do you think it's kind of, I don't know, what was the ending for you?
I think it will be very, very hard for the tradition to stay alive. Within the AMA, they are making changes, like, you know, someone like Aiko, you know, it's only been the last few years that they've really started having outsiders come in and be trained. And it's also hard, right? It takes years to train as an AMA, and it's a lot of investment for them. And I know they've had several instances where people have come and then actually within a few months realized that it's not nearly as fun and glamorous as it seems. And it's quite a tough way of life. But also, you know, it's the sad truth is a lot of it is to do with climate change and global warming and how sustainable their way of life is, and also how little, like, how much fishing has become not a sustainable practice. There's a lot of elements at play that would require quite a lot of big changes for them to survive. And it's also sad because they hold a huge amount of knowledge, especially oceanic knowledge. There's one other community in Korea that do something very similar. And I know that there have been some moves to try and bring both those communities together to try and sort of discuss how can we work better, and in terms of like how we take care of the ocean and what we can learn from them. So I really hope that they find a way to survive, but I think, as with a lot of things that are similar to that at the moment, it's requires a lot from the rest of the world. It's not really up to them, I don't think.
Yeah, for sure. And going forward for you, what other projects are you working on? Was this a recent project? Well, I guess obviously not over the past year, because we're all stuck indoors, but I mean relatively recent.
Yeah, I think we shot it in 2018, so a little while ago now. But yeah, I've just actually got back from Korea. I was shooting a documentary series out there for a couple of months, which was an interesting time to be out there during all of this. I did the whole quarantine and
oh God,
a million tests. But yes, that'll be a really interesting series. It's called Deciphering Korea. It's broadcast on Channel News Asia, but it's accessible all over the world, and it's looking at the social and political state of Korea today. So yeah, I'm just kind of keeping on going and trying to survive through all this craziness and come out the other side. But yeah, more of the same, I hope.
For sure. And if there's any budding documentary makers out there, from your experiencing with your experiences traveling to Asia and kind of being between both worlds, what kind of advice would you give them for making their own documentaries?
I think if it's specifically about balancing two cultures. I just think that respect is everything. I think it's very easy when you're a filmmaker to kind of barrel in with your own preconceived notions of what you expect the place to be like or what you want from it. But actually, if you just kind of let them teach you, let the experience teach you, it opens up doors that you never would have previously, had accessible to you. And outside of that, I think it's, I think it's really easy in documentary filmmaking to want to go and get the big glitzy story. And I say that knowing full well that I'm talking about a film that was shot in Japan. But I also think, there are, especially now, given what everything's happening, like there are stories literally all around you. And one of my favorite things to see is like really small stories that touch on really big ideas or really big common themes. And I think one of the things that this last couple of years has taught me is that actually there's the remarkable in the kind of ordinary all over the place. So just because we can't necessarily, flit about as much as we want to doesn't mean that there aren't still amazing stories to tell. So, for now, I feel like find those and tell those stories. And I'm excited. It's exciting to see the kind of stories people are making at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Georgie, thank you so much for being a part of Shorts on Tap and our reality check documentary series. Your documentary, Amma, is just absolutely stunning. And yeah, fingers crossed for feature length, hopefully.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Katya, welcome along to Shorts on Tap. This has been our reality check documentary series, and we're so thankful for you giving us this incredible, this whole incredible story. I mean, from start to finish, I just was completely gripped by everything that was happening and how current the issue still is. And of course, it is about abortion. It's something that's obviously very sensitive in different parts of the world. But what really struck me was how I'm in the UK right now, and it's not really, I mean, it's a conversation, but it's not something that's in our world. It's almost unbelievable that this is still happening elsewhere. Can you tell me a little bit about how you started with this topic and how it all began for you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jess, for such a compliment on the film. Yes, I guess for me it started pretty the same. I was shocked, to be honest, that in 2018 the women had to go to the streets and march in order to basically demand a basic human right, access to healthcare, access to safe abortion. Yeah, so, and then it started with me in conversations with many activists, with many women who've been on the streets for, at the time, 3 years, marching regularly. And I was working then as a news journalist. So basically I was covering Argentina regularly, and every time there is a news package from Argentina, it would involve the women marching on the streets in front of the Senate. So when, fast forward then to August 2018, the bill to repeal abortion ban was for the Senate to decide, and it didn't happen. It didn't pass with like a very little margin. It's like 2 votes or something. And at the time, Ireland just repealed the abortion ban. So it happened for Ireland, but it didn't happen for Argentina, where there was like a nationwide women movement, one of the biggest women movement in the whole continent. So I was really surprised by that. And it happened that I was on assignment in Argentina, and I got a chance to actually speak to the activists just to figure out how and why, and started in conversations, and then I decided to document it. And in my journey of documenting it, I ended up meeting women who formed like underground network of leading women like to safe abortion, but of course unofficially, because otherwise they would face like criminal charges for that.
I just, even now, like talking about it, it feels quite emotional. The part where we realized it was 2 or 3 votes in it, and then how powerless some of the people felt. Like, I mean, you had thousands of these people, these women marching, and then in the I guess the big building that was holding all the power, and I think they mentioned there were only 3 under 30 people in there, 2 of which only 1 or 2 of them were women. And it just means that actually there are loads of these old men controlling the decision on these women's bodies. And I think I'm not personally affected by specifically abortion, but there was something that I wrote down from one of the activists saying no woman is free until every woman is free. And it's so astonishing to me that it's still so kind of, I guess, backwards.
Yeah, I mean, as you noticed, that it was not only about legalizing the abortion, it was also about who has the control over a woman's body, over woman's uterus, because, well, in reality, women didn't have it. And we're not talking about we're talking about contraceptives that were also not available, like, the after pill that you can get in pharmacy. There's just no such thing. And we also, like, from my research before, I know, like, I learned that around 3,000 contraceptives were bought by Argentina in 2018, 3,000 for like the whole nation, and only fewer women were allowed to do abortions, because, at the time the legal abortion could be performed in the 2 cases, really, in the case of rape and if the mother's health was in danger. And then he still, by talking to women, he still would encounter obstacles in order to prove, in order to get to the doctor whose beliefs correspond to your beliefs. So because the doctor even now can refuse performing abortion due to doctor's belief. So but then returning to your point about who made the decision, that was also a big part of it. And also the role of Catholic Church, of Catholic doctrine that influenced the politics, because it's not separated in Argentina. Catholic Church is not separated from the power, so it's also an important factor that obviously influenced that. And then we also see, now we probably will talk about it further on, that once the power has changed in Argentina, we all know that in 2019 a new president was elected who actually made his mission to abolish repeal the abortion ban. So, and the president was widely seen as democratic, and he stated that since the abortion ban achieved nothing, and what it did is that it costed lives of 3,000 women since 1983. So, and once this political shift happened, we also see a different discourse around the bill. So it's one thing influencing another. So women movement, as strong as it is one thing. It's been there. It hasn't been any weaker in all these years. But who is in power is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that struck me as well, which is good, is obviously if you bring up pro-abortion or pro-life or against life, the whole debate, a lot of the focus is on the actual end product of what happens. But I feel like in your documentary you cover a lot of the situations where it is about, firstly, the kind of patriarchal power on it, but also it does cover as well the fact that just by legalizing it doesn't mean that a whole bunch of loads and loads of people are just going to open the floodgates with abortions. That's not what it's for, and that's not what it's about. It's not because everyone wants them, it's some craze. it's just yeah, it's the control and the power, and also no woman, well, I don't think anyone in, well, the women that we're talking about don't get pregnant without a man being involved as well, and the fact that they could get put in prison for it is just, it's like, what about, I don't know, there's so many different things. What's been the response to this documentary?
Well, I'm very humbled to say that all the people who participated in the documentary, they were very pleased with the result. They texted me, commented on like some of the posts about the film, and they also made a mission to keep me up to date on like what's happening with the abortion debate after I left Argentina. So that was great. And I mean, I just thought it's very important to document that part, of time where women had to march in the streets for 5 years to get access to safe abortion. Now, since January 24th, Argentina finally abolished the ban, and women have access to safe abortion for the first 14 weeks since the pregnancy, which is great. But then we also need to remember that Argentina is only the third country in Latin America to allow safe abortions after Guyana and Guatemala, I think. Yeah, so there's still, in Dominican Republic, it's impossible. Under no circumstances there is like no such thing as safe abortion. Colombian activists are now trying to repel abortion ban from the criminal system. So again, to not prosecute women for abortion. And at the same time, once abortion became safe in Argentina, Argentinian NGOs also working on cases of women who were prosecuted for abortions. And I was surprised to learn that there are like 1,500 of these cases from 2012, and 37 of them are miscarriages. So this has to be dealt with now. And since abortion became safe abortion became a reality for Argentinians, it's also, there's still a lot to be done to provide infrastructure for this to happen, to because there's still a lot of obstacles, like anti-abortion activists that and more conservative regions that are not implementing this very easily, and still claiming that was unconstitutional. So it's a lot to be done.
Still more work to be done, more documentaries to be made, perhaps. What is coming up next for you, Katya?
I'm actually very excited. I just finished my second documentary, so that was my first.
That was your first documentary?
Yeah.
Wow, powerful.
Thank you so much. No, it means a lot to me, and I never thought I would make a documentary, but I was just, once I started, it was really hard to stop me. So, but my second documentary was made in lockdown, in collaboration with a cinematographer in New York. So we did this cross-ocean collaboration, and we did on the topic that is most in the air right now, COVID. And so we produced this second documentary that is looking into a handful of New Yorkers who decided to help during the shortages of personal protective equipment by making their own and providing it to hospitals and frontline workers. And it's a very exciting story, and we were just super lucky to be able to document it, because it was just like a tiny window of time where frontline workers relied on community so much, like nowhere in the world. So that's coming up this year.
Amazing. And that's like a stamp in history as well, isn't it? Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be out of this situation extremely soon. It's looking like things are being lifted over here in the UK. But Katya, thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see what's next for you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jacob, thank you so much for joining us for Shorts on Tap. Your film, Le Plume and Le Paper. Am I meant to say Le Paper as well? Is that meant to be an and?
Sure. You can.
Sorry, that was very British of me, wasn't it? Just
no,
to
it's
go
okay.
with, straight in there with the and the British accent. But yeah, La Plume et Le Paper. Is that better?
Yes, it's perfect.
Honestly, the way it's shot, beautiful. It's just really stunning. And I also wanted to know where you met this guy. I mean, he's a dancer, a painter, a hip hop dancer specifically, I think he mentions.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you met this guy.
Man, it's an interesting story of connection and the power of the internet. I have been deeply connected with the dance industry in Los Angeles for a really long time. My wife is a professional dancer, so she was on a show called So You Think You Can Dance, and one of the executive producers of that show, Jeff Thacker, is a really, really dear friend of mine. And I was literally just hanging out with him one day, and he showed me a mural that Bust had done of one of the former contestants, a girl named Comfort. And I was blown away. I loved his art. And so I just reached out on Instagram. That's literally how we met, and connected there. And we talked maybe for a year and a half, just kind of like brainstorming. There was no specific like end goal in mind. There was no like, hey, let's do a piece together, how we could make that work. We just kind of got to know each other for a period of time, doing like WhatsApp calls, and we just clicked. We really connected. And so I tried to maneuver some sort of trip to get out there based on like a larger mural piece he was doing, because that would obviously be like the vessel for whatever film I could make. And so he ended up doing this thing. It's like his favorite place in the world is that little island off the coast of France. And for me, I'm like, man, I would love to go there. That sounds fantastic. And he had a relationship. Yeah, exactly. It didn't take much for me. He had a relationship with Pony International. And so I just hit them up and basically said like, hey, we're doing this thing. Would you be interested in sponsoring this video, or at least just the costs? And they did. So I was able to get myself out there, and we spent like 2 weeks together. It was, for a short piece like that, it's a long period of time, but we spent a whole bunch of time together and ended up with like a lifelong friend. So it was easy to make something beautiful about him, because he's a beautiful soul.
It's interesting that you say, because I did sort of, when you wonder, oh, like, where is this going? And it is a short, so it's a bite-sized kind of look into his life. And it almost, I could feel the energy was very chill, and it was kind of like explorative, and you were just kind of getting behind what he's about and what he does. And he even mentions about making your eyes dance, and the energy and the vibrations that you kind of feel through that. And it's so amazing that you managed to capture that. Was it a lot of filming that you did, and then quite a lot of, I guess, creativity in terms of cutting it down to make it into this piece? Or did it all just come together quite naturally, would you say?
I did film a good bit, but mainly because it took almost two days to finish the actual piece. Like the mural itself was like one day is almost entirely all prep, like him prepping the wall. But really it was just like the amount of time that I got to spend with him. So not necessarily filming. It was all just like, person to person, driving trains, like all that stuff, just making the commute. I think it was almost 4 hours from where we were to where he lives in Paris, or outside Paris. And so we just got a lot of time together. So I didn't necessarily, I knew I had a start and an end, basically, which is like the creation of this huge mural. And everything else was just like, well, how can I show who this guy is, or a little bit of his ideology? Because that's what I was attracted to, was just this kind of like otherworldly approach to art, not necessarily just like his painting, but the way that he moves and the way that he likes to express himself. So that part of it really did come together organically after the fact. So I knew that obviously, you know, at the minimum, I was going to have this beautiful creation of a mural. But it ended up turning into a piece that really wasn't very much about the process. It was really about his like art theory, which I liked. And then you can reveal a wonderful mural. But I mean, anybody can see his work because of Instagram. You can go online, you can see like, you know, these epic pieces that he does, you know, weekly. So for me, I just wanted to like have you step into his mind just a little bit, step into his mind and just feel like what it would be like to sit right next to him while he creates. Because for me, from my perspective, what blew me away the most is it felt like chaos. It felt like you know, everything feels super spontaneous. You know, the way that he looks and takes steps back and refers to his like, you know, the images that he's trying to like pull from, like actual photographs. It all feels like a little bit chaotic, but it's so intentional. You know, that's what blows me away is like you have so much, like you said, energy wrapped up into a singular image. And when you finally zoom out and see that final piece, it blew me away.
I was just the whole way through, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if you kind of zoomed out and it was just like a complete mess, or you were just like, I don't get it.
Right, right.
I've even written like with underlines, like so much movement in the art. And I think you managed to capture that really beautifully. And also it's like film with art, like actual physical art that you have the end product, like you said, at least we'll have that at the end. But also the dancing intertwined with it as well. And then the music, it's like you've hit all different spectrums of the art world just with this one guy, Alex Bust Stevens. Do you know where his nickname comes from? Do you know where the bust comes from?
It's just that's like a slang term for dancing, like you get down and you bust. So that was that. And then obviously his painting, his whole handle being bust the drip, that's like his whole thing. But yeah, it's interesting, like his using his real name, you know what I mean? I was like, I just called him Bust the whole time, and that's like how he introduces himself to other people. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I mean, what a guy, what a find.
Yeah.
A lifelong friend as well.
Yeah, we keep in touch. He just had a baby, and I was getting pictures from just the other day of his newborn, and yeah, we literally made like lifelong friends.
Amazing. And what's next for you in terms of filming? Are you going to be making more pieces like this, do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm always looking for another little gem. I own a production company that we have been putting together a slate of features and television for years. So I have a feature that's in the cooker that I'm trying to get off the ground right now to shoot, hopefully later this year. But if all goes well with financing, as we all know, that's the giant hoop. But yeah, I'm always looking for these small little gems of stories. There's something special about making documentaries as opposed to scripted content that I really love. My first feature I ever did was a doc, so I dove straight into what that experience was like on a very big scale. I produced it, and me and the director, basically the two of us, made this whole feature together. And I fell in love with the very idea that as a filmmaker for documentarians, you get to experience what's happening at the same time, you know, and you're a part of it just as much, you know, as the subject. Sometimes you're just a voyeur, but so I'm always looking for little stories like this, and I would, you know, chomp at the bit to do something again with Bust. We've been, you know, bouncing around a couple ideas of something new to do together, but 2020 hit as well, and it was like, well, we live halfway around the world from each other, so maybe when this all dies down,
time for a chill, time to,
yeah,
well, I guess, make a family in Bus world.
yes.
If there's anyone watching who perhaps would like to start making documentaries, or perhaps you have a particular way, any tips, hints, tricks that you could share approaching your documentary making, do you have anything to share for us?
Man, I I actually just I recently got asked that same question. Someone was asking like, well, what's your process like? I feel like I got spoiled early on as a producer working with a very good documentarian, another director named Jake Viramontes. And that for me changed the whole perspective on like creative control. And so if you can surrender to the fact that you don't really have control over what this movie is going to be, and you have to be able to move and adapt to how it's changing in the moment, because it is just someone's actual real life or real experience that's unfolding, then I think the most can come out of a documentary is if you allow it to be as organic as it is, and not put any expectations on what it should or could be. So for me, that's all I'm always ever trying to do. And of course I have my own, like, you know, creative sensibilities, like the way I like to shoot, or, you know, whatever that is. And that just comes from like going out and shooting a lot. And anybody can kind of like let that style adapt to them if they're just in practice. But yeah, when it comes to any sort of new filmmaker out there, I would say just make something you're really interested in, because the more you're interested in a subject, the more magical the actual experience will be for the both of you. And then it doesn't, not to say it doesn't really matter what it looks like cinematically speaking, but sometimes that can be the case. If you go into something with like the most beautiful intentions and somebody is you're experiencing the most raw elements of who they are, and they're comfortable with you and they want to share that moment with you, and sometimes it doesn't really matter what it looks like. It's still going to be just as powerful because it's honest. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Well, Jacob, thank you so much for joining us and also sharing that with us, and also the film as well. Anything else that you've got coming up, just make sure to let us know. Did you say you're working on a feature? That's the one that's
Yes, that's the big project at the moment for sure. But I do have a bunch of other smaller stuff in the cooker. Anything that I get wrapped up, I'll definitely let you guys know.
Honestly, keep us updated. Thank you so much for joining us for our reality check series of Shorts on Tap.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jeremiah Quinn, it has been, what is it now? Probably 6 years since we got to hang out, and last time it was in person at a Shorts on Tap event. But of course, welcome back to Reality Checks. This is our documentary special, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us. How have you been?
I've been great. It's been a dramatic 6 years for everybody, hasn't it? Let's be honest.
Especially the last one. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. That's what I meant.
Obviously we've invited you on for your program Stolen Years, and I'm not gonna lie, it went in straight at the deep end. I felt like we really got the backstory quite quickly of William, and there's a lot in there, and I'm just very pleased that at the end, I guess there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and he managed to find a great charity which helped him. But I want to start with how you actually got to know William in the first place.
The film is how I got to know him, and it has a slightly strange genesis. I make these films for the Centre for Social Justice about little charities that are doing really interesting work around the country. And they're a multi-party think tank in Westminster, and they do a showcase of these charities. And so it's for an award for them. They get a film made and get to be part of this showcase. But the requirement for that is the 3.5-minute film that really promotes the charity. And the centerpiece of that was the interview with William. I heard that he was a good speaker, and I got him to tell his story. And actually, I think only his wife knew. Not even the people that he worked with knew the story when he told me it. And I went and I cut the 3.5-minute version, and it ate away at me. I mean, that did the job, I think, very well for the purposes that they needed it. They need them that short for this big award ceremony. But it ate away at me for a long time. I was thinking that I didn't tell his story fully. There were lots of bits that I, obviously it's 7:43 now, I think. and it's jam-packed, isn't it? It's wall-to-wall talking about huge drama of his life. And I eliminated all sorts of bits of it in order to compress it and tell it, and in order to make the charity bigger in it. And one day I just said, right, I'm just gonna contact him. I'm gonna see what he says. And I wrote it to him and to the charity at the same time and said, would you mind if I cut, the full story together? And he said, I've been hoping that this would happen, and I wanted to ask you to do it because I want a record of what I said, but I didn't dare to ask you. And so it all came together beautifully like that he wanted it and I wanted it, and I cut it in a day. I'd been thinking about all the bits and pieces of it that was so dramatic that I wanted to put in it. I cut it in a day and I sent it to him, and he said, yeah, just print it. It's more, I think I was allowed to be more emotional as well, take more time over the bits and pieces. For instance, when we did the interview, I did something I'd never done before. I filled a card on the camera. I absolutely filled it jam-packed. I just ran out of space because I just was sitting there agog while he was telling his story. And he cried a few times, and he said, please don't show me crying. And I honored that, and then went away and cut it, and I let him get a little bit emotional in it. But in this one, having built his trust and saying to him, I'm going to show you this, and you're the only person who's going to see this, and you let me know if this is a problem. Having built that trust, and he was delighted with the result before, I expanded those bits a bit where he's struggling with his emotions, because they're just such big things, and I really wanted to show the weight of it, and how it had hurt him and weighed down on him. I wanted to do justice to the size of the things that befell him, the terrible things that happened to him.
Honestly, it's such a I guess outrageous story, but you're right, he's such an incredible talker as well, and I'm pleased that you were able to get a bit of emotion in there. Otherwise I'd think I wouldn't be able to believe what I was hearing from him, talking so candidly about it. And then, of course, like you mentioned, it initiated through the charity, and there was a positive ending to it. Can you talk to me a little bit about the charity and how it helps some people?
Yeah, they are. They're called FEAT, Fife Employment Access Trust. And I'm hoping there's going to be a donate button and a link to their website for anybody who wants to look into their work. There's a very strong scientific basis to their work. They do a lot of, cutting edge work in how to help people with mental health problems back into employment. And that's seen as a world-class program that they run in that sense. And they help a lot of people. And the processes that they use are very gentle and very affirming, and people don't actually think that they're doing therapy, but they realize suddenly that they feel better and they're more able to cope. And William had worked, he'd gone for every type of occupational therapy and all those things, and he'd found that he still, after years, was not coping any better until he worked with FEAT. So they produced a miraculous result really with him. It's 5 years that he was really, he says, just lying around the house, just on the sofa, not able to deal with his family properly or do a job or anything. So their work is great. They're a terrific organization, and delightful to deal with as a filmmaker. When you go into a place and you know how you're treated. If you're sort of said, don't bother us and whatever, or welcomed in and given everything you want and all the access. And it was just a hint that William had a story to tell. He spoke very well, and I knew that. And that was indicated to me, but nobody knew what I was going to get in that interview. Nobody except William.
It's just, I'm still thinking about it now, and it honestly gives me goosebumps. And what's so powerful is, obviously, it's called Stolen Years, but we don't see those 5 years. Obviously, you've got this small window into his life, and he's managed to give us so much as well. So I think you've done an amazing job of capturing it, I guess, as well. So I'm wondering where it's been shown. Has it been shown publicly now? Has there been much of a response towards all of this?
Yeah, we launched it. I gave them a little bit of advice about social media and getting it out there, and we launched it together. Fife Employment Access Trust and me, just privately, just put it together, put a little plan together, and they had a huge response. They got, you know, a load of donations and a lot of shares, and I think some referrals, because some of the people who made comments on YouTube said, I would like to, yeah, be able to do this as well. And yeah, so I think there were people who were coming out because they could see that, you know, what had happened to him and how he'd been able to cope and get back to work and feel like, you know, as he says, you know, feel like he's a full person again, feel joined up in his relationships and life.
Do you have any advice as well, or perhaps maybe you could tell us how you approached, like you said, you didn't actually know personally William before. So approaching and coming into something that is so sensitive, how did you prepare and how did you approach it?
I've done a lot of interviews with vulnerable people of all types, and my approach is that you give the power to them. I think that's really important, that as a filmmaker, even if in this case I have 2 clients with this, I have Feet who have to approve what is said about their process and all the rest of it, and I have the CSJ who are commissioning and paying for it. And in the first instance, actually this cut, I was able to do whatever I wanted. But at that point of approach, the vulnerable person is the boss, right? You make them the boss and you say, this is your story. And anything you tell me in this, because it was I didn't have the budget to go to Fife to visit him originally. I had to make a phone call as the first point of contact. And I said, anything you say in this phone call doesn't have to be used, and you don't have to repeat it on camera. We're just discussing it, okay? And you can allow or disallow any part of your story. And I think when you give someone that power to create their own narrative, they feel trust. And then I explained that he would be the first person who would see it, right? I don't care who the other organizations are. I always work like this with vulnerable people. You say, you will see this first. Nobody will see something you don't approve. Okay, you're allowed to withdraw everything. And the result with that is that the trust that you're giving to them in expressing their own story, the power that you're giving to them, makes them feel more at liberty to talk, because they know that they're going to get right of veto after. And actually, that has always really worked for me in getting a terrific story out of somebody who's suffered or some terrible circumstances and is in some form of recovery, whether it's addiction, drugs, you know, just a terrible, been through the mire, whatever it is. And I do that. And then, so they approve it first, and then it goes up the chain after that. And so when he said this thing about not crying, you know, he was the one who saw it then and said, I'm fine with what you've cut. That can be now seen. And so, and actually we didn't have any objections, but I think there was a lot of trust both ways because of that way of working. And I recommend that to anybody who has to make a film of this nature about a sensitive interview. Give the power to the person being interviewed, and they will reward you with telling you, telling their story fully in general, because they know that they can edit it after if they need to. There was, I mean, I generally also with vulnerable people, you have to protect them against incriminating others, and I've done a lot of this where you have to cut out when they tell you who gave them their drugs first, or who, and they make it clear who it is through a family description, or they incriminate themselves as someone else. You just don't be doing that. They defame others, and you have to cut that stuff. And but you tell them that. You tell them if you say anything that's gonna harm, that could harm you, I will make sure that that's not in as well. Yeah, and I think if you explain that process, you get a great result. That's my experience of it. I've sort of built it up over time of just doing a lot of interviews like that.
Yeah. Well, that obviously makes perfect sense, but I think as perhaps an interviewer, someone might get wrapped up in their own sort of questions and perhaps agenda. So yeah, like you said, letting them take full control of their story and their narrative, definitely a more positive way of going into it. Well, I know we were discussing some bits that you had coming up next. What can you tell us that we can look forward to, or what are you working on, Jeremiah?
I can't tell you everything. I've got some very exciting things in the pipeline, but I wrote a spec script about the blind man who found Adolf Eichmann in Argentina, the Nazi on the run. It was a blind man who found him, not Mossad. People think it's Mossad. Mossad collected him. I provided the address and then the ID card and everything else. And it's about his journey to finding that. And he wasn't born blind. He was blinded by the SS in Dachau. So that's probably why he had such a strong desire to see justice done. It's been optioned by Indefinite Films, which is Bruce Goodison and Kate Cook. And their work has won a lot of BAFTAs, and we're developing a TV series based on my spec script. It's on their website.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
This is exciting. Yes. And also some other things that you haven't told us, that you definitely haven't told us, are also very exciting too. Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, what? I'll be back and update you on another occasion. I'm sure I'll have something else to show you out.
Amazing. And hopefully in person too as well. Hopefully at our next Shorts on Tap in-person event. But Jeremiah Quinn, honestly, Jeremiah Quinn, thank you so much for joining us today at Shorts on Tap.
Thank you very much, Jess, and congratulations on all your success since I last saw you as well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, thank you very much for joining us for Reality Check, a journey through documentary making with us here at Shorts on Tap. My name is Jess Iszatt. Thank you so much for joining us at home. Huge love to the filmmakers as well for lending us those incredible documentaries. I hope you enjoyed them. At Shorts on Tap is where to find us on the socials. shortsontap.com is also where to get us online. And of course, you can hit subscribe on our YouTube channel. Just search Shorts on Tap. I will see you next time.